Hey, what's going on, guys? So we do a lot of JavaScript on this channel. We do full stack, Node.js, React, Vue, vanilla JavaScript. But for the most part, when we do vanilla JavaScript, it's a very simple workflow. We just have one or two JavaScript files that we directly include into our HTML, which is fine, but you may want to build something that's larger where you have multiple files, where you create, custom components and stuff without having to use a framework. So in that case, you need some kind of application bundler. And Parcel is great for that. You have Parcel, you have Webpack. I like Parcel a lot better. I think it's a lot easier and much less configuration. So we're going to create a boilerplate that you can use to create vanilla JavaScript projects that are more advanced, where you can have different files. So you can see in the source folder I have a main app.js, but then I have a components file. So if you want to have some kind of component structure, you can. You don't have to do it that way, but that's just an example. And we're also going to include sass so that we can use SCSS files directly. We'll be using Babel, which will allow us to use modern JavaScript and compile it down to backwards compatible JavaScript for older browsers, and we'll be able to use the ES 2015 syntax, the import syntax. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to just open up VS Code here. I have an empty folder. We're going to start from scratch. If you don't want to go through the tutorial, you can just clone the repository. I'll have it in the description. And I'm open to people making pull requests, because the way that I set it up with the components, it isn't the best. It's just kind of a simple way to do it. But let's go ahead and get started here. So we want to npm init. I'm just going to add -y so I don't have to answer any questions. And this will create a package.json, obviously, as you can see here. And we have some dependencies that we want to install. I don't really want to type them out, so let me see if I can find them. Here they are. So we have npm install -D, because these are dev dependencies. We have the Parcel bundler, which is going to take care of bundling everything. Sass, so that we can use SCSS files in Sass. Babel, so Babel core. We have this Babel plugin, transform runtime, and also core.js 2. So I'm going to just go ahead and run that real quick, and you guys can copy that if you want. And this plugin that I'm installing here, let me just go to this page here. So this is the transform runtime plugin, and this is a plugin that enables the reuse of Babel's injected helper code and saves on code size. All right, and we actually need to configure this in the Babel RC file. So if you've ever worked with Babel before, you're probably familiar with this file. Whenever you have any plugins, you need to initialize them in that file. So I'm going to copy this object right here and go back, and you can see those dev dependencies are all installed. So in the root, I'm going to create a .babelrc file here and just paste that in. So we're just describing any plugins we're using, which we're using this transform runtime plugin. And the only options we need here are core.js and regenerator. So let's get rid of that. Now core.js we installed, and we're using version 2, so we just want to put a 2 here. And go ahead and save that. And that should be it as far as configuring Babel. Now for our file structure, we're going to create a folder called public, and this is where our HTML file is going to go. So let's create an index.html, and we'll set this up real quick. We'll just say my app, and here let's put we'll just put a h1 for now and say hello world. Now the script that we want to include is going to be in our source folder. So let's say source, and then we want to go, we haven't created it yet, but we're going to go up one level into source, and then our app.js file. So let's create that. We'll create a folder called source, and in here will be our app.js, which is our JavaScript entry point. So for now, I'll just say console log, and in here we'll say it works. Okay, so that's connected. Now, what we need to do is create a couple scripts that utilize Parcel. One is to run a dev server, just like you would with, like, create React app or Vue CLI. and then one is to build out our static assets to deploy. So let's start with the dev server here. So we want to get rid of all this. Now we're going to use Parcel to do this, obviously. So we're going to run Parcel, and we want to put the location of our main entry file, our index.html file, which is going to be in public/index.html. And then we're going to have an output directory here. So we want to do --out--dir, and we're going to call this directory development. And when we run our server, every time it's going to create this folder, it's also going to create a cache folder. Now we want to set a port that we want this to run on, so we'll do -p, and then I'm going to run it on 3000. Now one more thing I want to do is at the beginning here, before we actually run this command to run our dev server, I want to remove the development folder and the cache folder. So basically when we run the server, it's going to recreate these folders every time. So let's run rm-rf, which will delete a directory with files in it, and we're going to do /development $&, and then we want to also remove the .cache folder that's going to be created. So /.cache, and then $&, and then it'll continue to run Parcel and run the dev server. Now for the build command, okay, so for build, we're just going to run Parcel build. And you can run Parcel you can install it globally and run it that way if you want, but this is meant to be something that people can clone and use, so we want to do everything locally. So we want a Parcel build, and then we need to put in our public index.html file, and then we want to attach an output directory here, which will be all of our static assets. I'm just going to copy React's convention and call it dist, and just add on here --public-url, and then /. And if we save that, we should be able to go ahead and run this. So if we go down here, we run npm run dev, you'll see that over on the side here, it created this development folder, and then this cache for this .cache folder. And whenever we restart the server, it's going to remove these, okay, and basically recreate them. And you can see the server's running on localhost 3000. If I open that up, we should see hello world. And if I open up my console, we see it works. So that app.js is also running. Okay, so I mean, just up to this point, we now have a dev environment where we can create modules and all that good stuff. So the next thing I want to do, actually before we do anything else, let me show you the build command. So if I do npm run build, what that does is it just compiles everything into static assets into this dist folder. So if I were to open this dist folder, if I reveal this in my Finder here, and I just open up index.html, we'll see the same thing. And we'll see it works. Okay, so this is the bundled version of our app that we would deploy to a server. So it's as simple as that to get set up, and we can delete the dist folder. It's going to recreate it every time we run npm run build. We can also delete the cache and development folder. I mean, it would delete it anyways when we run the server again and recreate it. So I'm going to run the server again, npm run dev. You can see that it recreated those files here. And I want to, what should we do next? Let's go to app.js, and I want to implement sass. So Parcel makes it really easy. I'm going to just create inside my source folder a folder called scss, and in here we'll create a file called app.scss, which will be like our main style sheet or our main sass file. And I'm just going to paste some stuff in here. So pretty simple. I'm just setting a primary color variable using sass, and then just, you know, some basic styling. We have a container and some styling for the header. So I'm going to save this, and then in my app.js, what I can do is directly import that sass file. So I can say import ./scss/app.scss, and let's go ahead and save that. And the first time you import it, you do have to reload to get the styling, but you can see now I have that styling from the sass file. Okay, so it's as easy as that. There's no compiling it down to a CSS file. I mean, it does all that stuff behind the scenes. Now, as far as, let's see, our index HTML, I'm going to get rid of this hello world. And the way that I'm going to do this is to have a div with an ID. So, for instance, a div with an ID of header. And then I'm going to use that as a placeholder for a header component. And then I'll do the same thing with, we'll have a user component. Now, the way I'm doing this isn't the best because I'm not going to be able to reuse components like this. But you could change things around, so you can do that. Building like a custom framework or whatever isn't really the point of this video. It's just to show you how to get this workflow set up so you can use packages and stuff like that. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and have these two divs here. Okay, nothing inside them, just the divs, kind of using them as placeholders. Now, let's see, let's go in our source folder. I'm going to create a folder called components. And I'm going to create a file called header.js. And as far as components in this little, I don't know, this little application I'm building, they're just going to be functions. So we'll say header, and we'll set this to an arrow function. And we want to have a template using template literal. So we want to use backticks here. And we'll go ahead and put in, let's use a header. I guess we'll use a header tag here. And in here we'll have an H1. Emmet works sometimes in these template literals, but sometimes it doesn't. So we'll say my parcel app, and then a paragraph. See, it didn't work there. And you can even use like JSX. There's a ton of stuff you could do. You could bring in style components. What I'm doing here is just something very, very simple. Say this is a boilerplate for a simple JS workflow using Parcel. All right, so that's my template, and then from this function I just want to return my template, and then we want to export this so that we can bring it into another file. So I'm going to export as default header, and of course you could use a class. You could create you know, parent classes and have lifecycle methods. You can do some really advanced stuff. Now this header component, I'm going to bring this into my app.js here. So let's go ahead and import header from ./components/header, and then we can get rid of this. And we're just going to have a function here called app. So this is basically our main function that's going to run. And we're going to grab from the DOM. I'm going to use getElementById header and set the inner HTML equal to our header function, or our header component. And then we need to run this app. So down here we'll just say init app. Okay, so this is a very simple way to do things, but you can see now we have our header here. Yeah, and it's got its styling from our app.js. We don't have the container around it. So in the index.html, I'm actually going to wrap our container around these two components here. So move those up and save, and now it's in the container. And obviously you can wipe out all the styling if this is just for an example. Okay, now let's create another component for the user, and I'm actually going to use an API for that. There's an API called randomuser.me where we can fetch random user data. And I'm just going to stop the server real quick and install Axios. Okay, so this is what's great about this, is you can just install whatever you want using npm, and we're on the front end and we're not using any type of framework or anything like that. So let's run npm run dev. And in components here, we'll create a new file called user.js. And this is going to be, structured the same way. We're going to import Axios though, so we can use that to fetch. And let's say const user. And I'm going to use async await, so we want to label this async because Axios returns a promise. So we'll say response equals await axios.get, and the URL is https randomuser.me/API, and what that gives us is an array with a single user by default. So let's say const user equals, and in res.data it's going to give us an array called results, and we just want the first item, which will be a user object. And then what we'll do is set the template, and for now I'm just going to set the template to just user and return our template. And then I just want to console log the data right here. So console log user, and then of course we need to export default user so that we can bring this into our main app file, just like we did with the header. So we'll bring that in, user, and then down here we'll do the same thing. We'll grab the element by ID, user, and set this to user. Now this does return a promise, so we have to async await here. So we'll have to label this function async. Now if I save that, let's see, get element by ID user, my index HTML, I have an ID of user. Did I save it? Oh, there we go. Okay, so now it's just outputting user because that's what we have as our template, but if you look down here, we're console logging the data we're getting back, which is, we have a name property with first and last, we have email, phone, all types of stuff, picture with large, medium, thumbnail. So we should be able to use that data in our component. So inside user here, let's get rid of the console log, and let's add our template here. And you can use HTML templates as well. You could integrate those. There's, like I said, there's a lot of stuff you can do. So don't think that what I'm doing here is the best way to do it. So let's put an image here. We'll do the avatar source. Let's see. So we have the user dot, and then there's a picture object, and we want the large picture. So if I save that, there we go. So we get a picture. Underneath that, let's put a class of card body. Whoops, that's not what I want to do. Getting languages mixed up here. Div class card body, and in here we're going to have an h1, and we'll put the user's first and last name, so we can get that with user.name.first and user.name.last. So if I save that, you can see we get the first, and it's always going to be a random user. And then let's put a UL. And a list item. So we'll do the user's email. And then copy that down. Let's do the phone. And let's do the location, which is an object, and then we want the city. Okay, so that gives us the data. Now we can style this. What I'm going to do is go into my SCSS folder and create a partial. So underscore card.scss, because remember we have it wrapped in a class called card. And I'm just going to throw that in there. So pretty simple, just going to give it rounded corners and stretch the image out, stuff like that. And then we can bring that partial into our main app.scss. We can say import card and that should show port card. Oh, you know what? I probably did what happened the last time. Yeah, so yeah, it made this into class name for some reason. I think it's the React extension that I have. All right, so there we go. So now it's styled, and you can see we have a user card. If I reload, it's going to fetch a new user and output that. Now, like I said, the way that I did this isn't really ideal, because if I were to put another div with the ID of user, it's not going to work. It's basically just replacing that. You could do like a query selector all and go through, or you could create a users component, loop through them, and then output them in there. There's just a lot of different things you could do, but I just wanted to give you kind of an example of how you can set things up for a pretty simple app. But it's not really, this stuff isn't really important. I just wanted you to have this workflow so that you can run your server, you can install modules, you can import third-party modules, you can also import other files, and it doesn't have to be a component structure or anything like that either. All right, so I think that's pretty much it as far as what I wanted to show you. I do have, again, the code in the description. And if I wanted to build this out, I could do npm run build, and we get this dist folder, and these are the files I would upload to my server, and everything would work fine. So in fact, I'll just show you real quick. If I show this in my Finder, go into dist, and I just open index.html on my file system, you can see that it works. And if I view my source code, you can see that everything is coming from the JavaScript, just like if you were to look at a React app or any single page application. Okay, that's it, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this, and again, use it if you want. If you want to make some changes to it, feel free to make a pull request. Just don't make it too complicated. I want for the most part, everyone to be able to understand it. But that's it, and I'll see you in the next one.